Good day. Far Cry is a far cry from what it once was in 2005. Where once we had a dude in a silly shirt fighting mad scientists, we now have a franchise that spans concepts and continents. We get African gun runners and cavemen? Yeah, after the release of Far Cry by Crytek in 2005, Far Cry just became a name and kind of a joke because each game appeared to be a far cry from the last. Far Cry 3 is where the franchise really got super popular. Far Cry 1 and 2 had been cult classics, but Far Cry 3 is when it hit the mainstream. And with Far Cry 3's success, each release was just that with a new texture pack and cavemen for some reason. The big problem I always had with the latter-day Far Cries was the lack of humor and just, fun concepts. Far Cry 3 was pretty good, but did we really need to bring in the whole sexual assault angle? And with drugs, and well, winners don't use those, and the whole subversion of the lone hero taking down the villains? I mean, this is a video game. I mean, this is supposed to be fun, right? I mean, do we really need the devs telling us, the players, that we are horrible people for wanting to shoot lines of binary at things? But with that in mind, Ubisoft, the purchasers of the Far Cry name, went ahead and made a fun game where you play a classic 80s action hero taking down classic 80s villains, all set to retro wave music. Go figure. Far Cry Blood Dragon was developed by Ubisoft Montreal and released in the halcyon days of 2013. This holy relic of a game was an expansion pack released to cash in on the surprising success of the much less lighthearted but still remarkably fun Far Cry 3. As an expansion pack, Far Cry Blood Dragon features many of the same gameplay beats as the main game. It's an open-world first-person shooter with more than 2 weapon slots. It has an XP-based character upgrade system, a health slot health system. Most of the game, you'll be given an entire island to explore. Throughout the game, you will find generic gameplay challenges, you gotta find so many TVs, and you can knock over enemy bases. That's my favorite. This is the best kind of open world gameplay. You rock up to an enemy base, and it may take 5 minutes to wipe out the lot of them, or 30 minutes if you play like crap. If you can tear yourself away from the shooty, you can also complete the generic plot related missions. This style of first-person shooter is one that is rather addicting, as all the gameplay elements reward exploration and killing shit, and thus nothing ever feels tedious or like a bloody slog. Weapons in the game befit its epic 80s stylings. In this game, you play as epic action hero Rex Power Colt, voiced by the most unsung of all the 80s action heroes, Michael Beanbine. You are a super cyborg of awesomeness, running basic A, and as such, you have a phased plasma pulse rifle in the 40-watt range. But the game's gotta make you work for that, sweet honey. One notable difference between Far Cry Blood Dragon and Far Cry 3 is how you upgrade weapons. You upgrade weapons by completing a gameplay challenge and then purchasing said upgrade with in-game currency. The upgrades in this game are far more powerful than in Far Cry 3. In fact, the weapons here are also much more overpowered than Far Cry 3's weapons. The game starts you out with RoboCop's pistol. It works alright, but your enemies will all have plasma rifles, and they bloody well hurt. Eventually, you will get a generic bullet shooter carbine. It's okay if you're an old FUD that thinks guns gotta shoot lead. One of the first things you need to do when starting a playthrough is you need to complete the gameplay challenge to unlock the plasma rifle upgrade and reject tradition and embrace modernity and add a phone charger to the pistol grip. The shotgun from Terminator 2 shows up and it's alright, but plasma. The Cobra Assault Cannon from RoboCop shows up and makes short work of the bastards, but we'll still need a few shots to take down the neon-colored lizards from beyond the stars. You get a bow, and it's got good light piping, but plasma rifle. Look, if you're in the 80s future of 2007, you gotta have a goddamn plasma rifle. The gameplay for Far Cry Blood Dragon, while not all that different from Far Cry 3, is a bit more fun because it's a much more imaginative world and the weapons are better than just your traditional AK shoddy pistol. Graphics for the game look good even in the space future of 2022. The game takes place at night, and as such, everything, even the dragons, are neon, and all the enemy bases have these giant glowing columns of light. The enemies are a cool 80s space biker design and have aged gracefully. The weapon models have also held up. The PC port's pretty decent. You get a few frame drops here and there, a few crashes here and there, but all told, it runs, and it runs pretty bloody well. With that in mind, you need to make sure you do not turn on the wrong anti-aliasing setting. If you do, that will tank a modern PC. Check the PC Gaming Wiki for more information. The game controls well with either a keyboard and mouse or gamepad. I played this entire game with a gamepad, and I was able to pull off a lot of headshots from a considerable distance. You cannot switch between keyboard and mouse and controller on the fly. Instead, you have to enable an option in the options menu. The game looks great in 2K, but this game was not designed for that in mind, and thus far-off objects may take a little more time to draw in, but it's nothing too jarring. Music for the game is really bloody good. Before this game, I had never even heard of the retro wave music genre. The entire soundtrack is 80-ish synth music that fits the game, and there are even callbacks and tributes to classic 80s movie themes, and fits this game like a glove, and is quite enjoyable to listen to outside of the game, and this is one of the top Alpha Prime soundtracks of all time, and a great listen to anyone who is a fan of the 80s. Sound design for the game is nothing short of excellent. All the guns sound really bloody good, especially the goddamn plasma rifle. Voice acting is pretty fucking sweet. With Michael Biehn as the main character, he doesn't phone it in, and neither does anyone else. They are all having a fun time, and it shows. For a simple expansion pack, there is quality packed into every aspect of this game. As gaming has matured, the concepts of clever writing and fun stories have kind of fallen by the wayside. In many cases, game stories are kind of ashamed to be games. Far Cry Blood Dragon, back in the far-off days of 2013, basically threw a giant robo middle finger to that concept. You can have fun stories and clever writing alongside heavy themes and questioning of reality. And you know what? You can also just shoot a bad guy in the face. Due to the lower budgeted nature of this game, we don't have full motion video cutscenes, but instead low detail NES styled comic panels. Lucien Solban, which is a pretty awesome name, the writer of this game, knew what made 80s movies great, and does a tremendous job poking fun at some of the cliches while playing many of them completely straight. It is the year 2007. The future. North America was devastated by a nuclear war, and from the ashes arose the Mark IV Cyber Commando! Rex, Power Cult, is tasked by the Briar Patch to infiltrate an enemy bunker and download some intelligence. Classic. We also are introduced to Spider, Rex's partner in awesomeness, who is straight out of 85. Your first mission is to get on the plasma minigun and have some fun tonight. It's obvious that I cannot play that track, but what plays here is the excellent Long Tall Sally by Little Richard. This is one of the handful of times that a turret section is not dull as hell. You and Spider separate after another epic Predator reference, and we get some pretty good parody about forced tutorials. You then engage in epic ultra violence. You learn that Colonel Sloan has gone rogue, and you gotta be a bad enough dude to take him down. However, Spider here needs more raging roids, cause we cut to an escort mission, and Spider, despite being a high-speed, low-drag cyber commando, has armor of EVA foam and an AI of a VIC-20. This has got to be by far the most annoying part of what is a truly epic opener. Spider has to hack the mainframe with his 1.6 GHz dual-core CPU. Another escort mission, but one that is easy enough. While recavoobling the energy motron, the AI overloads Spider's RAM chips and he falls into a coma. You then have to use the most advanced hacking technique of all time, percussive maintenance offset technique. You do so, a helicopter gets blown up, and of course, you get knocked unconscious. You learn the awful truth. Colonel Sloan, the Southern Fried Commander, is evil! After Canada was nuked, gotta nuke something, and Straya was invaded, the world needed leadership, and he is one to give it. Spider bites it 3 days from retirement, and Rex learns that part of his programming comes from Sloan himself! Rex is then knocked out and left for dead. Blood Dragon uses the Mel Brooks style of parody. Excellent films such as Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs were the films they were supposed to be, but had a lot of comedy thrown in. Blood Dragon is pretty much the same thing. This is a balls-to-the-wall action game with an over-the-top plot, but instead of taking the piss, the parody is weaved into the story, thus ensuring that the humor is laughing with the player and not at the player. And honestly, the classic evil commander save the day plot is still a good one even in the space future of 2022. Far Cry Blood Dragon has a very good hook for the player. You get to blast baddies in the first few minutes of the game, and thus you don't have to wade through the story to see if the game is fun or not. After you come to find yourself in a Blood Dragon cave, you get a little stealth section that is thankfully not too horrible. Good thing the blood dragons can't see. Oddly convenient, though. Your voice with an internet connection is Dr. Darling. She wants to defect from Sloane's side, and thus you have to rescue her, and you learn that Sloane turned evil after he drank blood dragon blood. As an old school gamer, that sentence is kind of normal. Shit like that happened all the time back in the 90s / early 2000s. I mean, crazy concepts like that is how you make villains and plots cool. So now, it's up to you to knock over every garrison in your path and be the most dangerous cyborg to ever run Windows XP X64 edition. There are a lot of garrisons to take out, but once you've had your fill of blasting 80 stormtroopers, it's time to get on with the main mission. You have to blow a dam so that Sloane will have less power for his Insano labs. You gotta protect another bot, but apparently this engineer is actually better than a cyber commando because keeping him alive is not as much of a pain in the old USB 1.0 port. You gotta fight some cyber sharks and blow a reactor. Sadly, the engineer Benji dies, but he died a real American hero. God, I love this game. Next, you have to descend into a mad science facility and take out some blood dragon eggs. Damn, this is awfully familiar. It must just be my imagination. After burning some xenomorph dragons, it's time to fight Dr. Insano himself. The infiltration part of the mission is super fun since you have to take to the skies on a neon hand glider, and we get more humor that is straight out of a Mel Brooks film. Dr. Insano argues with his AI. It's legitimately funny and doesn't go Joss Whedon on us. We then have to fight some blood dragons, and the game, like all new school games, tells us to hit his glowy bit. Dr. Insano tells us how to kill him. Yeah, it's a new school game mechanic where the game drills into your head how to play the game, but at least they turned it into a joke. You don't kill Dr. Insano himself, but instead he's killed by his aggrieved AI. So one element that we saw again and again in the base Far Cry 3 was the freakouts. Back in 2013, I thought they were kind of cool, but as of 2022, they're just really annoying, and I think they were done primarily to pad out the game time. The generic bro character would get high and imagine all sorts of crazy shit. Too bad the actual crazy shit didn't show up in the game, but I guess just fighting generic pirates was way more serious and therefore more legitimate. Thankfully, in this game, the crazy crap isn't tacked on in the form of a drug hallucination. Instead, you enter a magic temple, whereupon you fight for a debased god and kill a crap ton of cyber zombies, all to get the kill star. You got the touch. You got the power. In a nod towards realism, Rex has to train with the kill star in order to use it effectively. And in another callback, the Michael Beanbine voiced Rex Power Cult gets a pre-final battle sexy time with the alluring Jane Darling. The funny part here is that there's been a lot of character development between the two, and this sexy scene is not just a tacked on thing that comes completely out of nowhere. Rex and Darling work with each other over the course of the game, and you learn about their respective pasts, and they form a bond. Pretty good stuff for what is supposed to be a parody game. So, you got the final battle. You blast your way into Snake Mountain with the Killglaive star and get to killing. Sadly, this is where the lower budget nature of the game reduces the overall awesomeness somewhat. After some really epic firefights, you find a meme machine, aka an intelligent blood dragon, and astride this mighty colossus, you mow down your foes. While this sounds pretty cool, it's only cool on the surface as it's an on-rail segment. I'm a firing my laser would have been more fun if you had some control over it. The memes here aren't too bad, and they haven't aged too poorly, and if you don't have the cultural context for them, it just sounds like a dragon is saying funny crap. Alas, you do not get to kick Sloane's ass directly, instead it's done through cutscenes. The final fight against Sloane is filled with references, such as Directive 4, but it is way better than one would expect. It is filled to the brim with emotion, and if you took the references out, it would still be awesome. Rex sees the forced communication from Darling and uses his Tekken to rip out Sloane's heart, defeating the mad tyrant once and for all. And the game closes with Rex and Darling walking off into the sunset to live happily ever after. It's been almost a decade, and Blood Dragon 2 is getting less likely all the time. You know how you make a good parody, ladies and gentlemen? Don't make a parody. Make a good story first and then add in the parodic elements. Don't telegraph the references, have them woven into the story. Blood Dragon only dates itself to the 2010s in a few areas. Mostly, it weaves the comedy naturally into the dialogue, and if you know, you know, but if you don't, you can still enjoy elements from the game on their own merits. Having Rex Power say winners don't use drugs without the cultural context can still be funny, but with the context, it's even funnier. The overall plot and pacing for Blood Dragon is pretty Alpha Prime on its own. Cyber Commando taking down a mad Blood Dragon powered general is not only awesome, it's fucking memorable. Much more memorable than a gun-running pirate slaver. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon is what you get when you let the developers make a fun and imaginative game, and it is a game that I most assuredly recommend. Even though it is altogether too short, it is an experience that will last a lifetime. I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good Titanfall 2 and good AVP 2, whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.